Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Fireside conversation with Tuhina today. This is the second in series for women leaders leading into a panel discussion of women leaders about executive presence. Tuhina, a little bit about her. She is the head of corporate communication for IBM India and South Asia. Prior to that, she was the head of global corporate communications and public affairs at Tech Mahindra. Tuhina was a vice president at Media Training Worldwide and associate director at Aegis News Network. Tuhina also worked as an anchor and news business journalist in the capacity of an associate editor with technology for NDTV Profit and NDTV. She is also coaching CEOs and CXOs and board members on leadership communication. Or that is interesting now. She carries with her vast experience in the field of corporate communication, corporate affairs, business journalism, executive leadership, marketing, sales, digital communication. Oh my God, the list keeps going on. So without further ado, I am going to invite Tuhina, and I will want all of you to ask your questions to her because she's the right person to ask questions on executive presence and leadership. Welcome, Tuhina.
Fantastic to be here, Nandita. That was a long introduction, but more than anything else, I'm just excited because I know this space interests you. So, really happy to have this conversation with you and look forward to the questions as well.
Thank you. Tuhina, before I jump into the regular questions, from media to corporate communication, how was the transition as a leader? What were some of the changes that he had seen, and what was some of the learnings that you brought in from the various roles that you have lived into the current role?
So, Nandita, that's an interesting one. And frankly, for a long time, I couldn't figure it out myself. And I got asked that question a lot that, you have such a diversified, you kind of changed roles so many. What does it really mean? And how do you really make that happen? And my answer is simple, it's one life. And I have been instinctive, I mean, not foolish, but somewhat instinctive in my decision making. And I've always had the ability sometimes to connect the dots, take the learning from one walk of life and then apply it to the next. So, for example, I studied accountancy, then I moved into journalism, television, and then moving on to the corporate side and media training. It's ultimately about people. If you're interested in people, if you're interested in communicating, if you're interested in moving people into doing something, I think there is a connective tissue there in all of these. So I typically always try and kind of take the learnings and apply it to the next walk of life and then connect the dots onto the next. And I don't know which way life really turns. I don't think I have it all marked, but at least I know that while I kind of go on, I'll keep collecting the pearls of wisdom on the way.
So, Tuhina, it's not only your academics which is varied or your experience which is varied. If I remember my conversation with you a couple of days back, your, where you come from to where you moved in terms of geographies has also been very different. So, how has that shaped you as a leader is something I would like to understand.
And I remember that, Nadita, we belong to everywhere and nowhere. That's exactly your story as well. I mean, it took us a few minutes to even figure out, oh well, what do you really call home? And I'll be humble in that admission. I think I belong everywhere and nowhere. That's what my life has really become. I grew up in Calcutta, although originally my sort of family comes from UP. Now, been in Bombay, Bangalore, etc. What it does is, you become a sponge of culture and human relationships and perception. It widens you in a way that you look at people and not look at sort of the dimensions of it, but it also kind of challenges you because it's a lonely journey. You are sometimes lonely in a crowd. So it's been interesting, and I can only tell you that I wish I had multiple lifetimes to know just this mystical being called human mind. That journey continues, and it has changed me dramatically. I think from geographies and people and culture, it has made me into a much wider, broader, non-judgmental, if I may say so, as a person.
Awesome. So, with so much of varied experience in every aspect of life, and like you said, there is one life. What are some of the 3 to 4 characteristics of a leader that you think? And as a woman leader, I'm going to ask you that because this is a women's special that we're talking about. What are the characteristics of a woman leader that you think are imperative for growth today?
That's a curveball, Nandita. I will get into the generics of it, but yes, on the women front, right? It's a
Yeah.
little more nuanced than
Mhm.
it is. It just adds a little bit more nuance when you're a woman leader and your presence. I remember, I'll come to that features, but a story I recall when I moved from media to the corporate side. And I was always a fan of big bold colors. Orange and reds were plenty in my wardrobe. So I walked into this boardroom. There was a conversation and a presentation in motion, and someone I considered a mentor and a friend. This
Mhm.
particular gentleman, we came out of the boardroom and he said, Tuhina, I mean, do you really want to wear those kind of things? It just brings in a lot of attention which you don't want. If you want to blend in and be a part of the decision making and be taken seriously, you have to dress a bit like them. And that was a small incident, but it kind of shook me. And I was like, all right, this is a decision point. Am I going to stay myself, or I'm going to keep changing my wardrobe to blend in? And my decision is, you stand your ground. As a woman leader, I think you have to believe in yourself. You have to
Absolutely.
stand your ground. You have to be okay. You have to be comfortable being different. And then it's
Yeah.
really the same as men, because and to that characteristics, I feel leadership is about others, it's not about yourself. So if you walk into the room and you don't know what people want and what their insecurities are, what their vision is, what their dreams are, then you can't connect. So connecting the dots of people, of purpose, of vision is very important to a leader. I would also think you have to be inspirational, and
Mhm.
I don't mean it in a sort of a high voltage form, but you have to have the ability as a leader to move people into action. And if people don't feel inspired by you, then how? They're not going to really follow the path. And finally, I would say that you've got to lead by example and you have to be consistent. Nandita, you know that credibility infuses confidence.
True.
And if people don't walk that path and the projection, they say something and do something else, that credibility gap just widens and people don't believe. And then they don't follow you. So you're a leader in just name, not in true sense. So to me, that's what pops out at this point in time when you ask me that question.
So, a couple of things that you said, I'm going to pick them up and I'm going to ask you or take a deeper dive there. You said a word called you need to stand your ground. Now, that is something which I would resonate with very much. And of course, as a leader, be it a male or a female, it is important for both the genders to stand their ground. Also, you said you need to be authentic. You need to find out who's the real you because you can't keep changing for people. And another word that you use is credibility and consistency. So, how important is credibility and consistency in having a strong executive presence because you do work with CXOs? So, what is the role of credibility and consistency? Two very important words, the two C's. For executive presence, because you work on the third C, which is communication, which is again a very important one. So go ahead and share some of your views on that, Reena.
Yes, Nandita, and I do recall you'd given me an example as well of how you stood your ground. So would love to hear your part as well. But let me dive into mine first. So let's look at it this way: that um, if imagine you keep saying something
Mm-hmm.
and your actions are something else,
Mm-hmm.
the the cognitive dissonance that is formed in the people's mind, ultimately they say, well, wait, the leader talked about this, but the action is just something else. And the moment that chasm sort of widens, people, you will be left alone. So if you as a leader don't want to be left alone, you got to be consistent and walk the talk, right? That is very important. Also, in terms of crisis, Nandita, I think credibility comes to fore. And
Yeah.
without taking names, you've seen this business conglomerates going through crazy crisis episodes and still coming out a winner and with credibility intact simply because they invested in their reputation in peacetime. They've consistently every day invested in earning that reputation, walking the talk. So when a crisis hits, people are willing to forgive you because they see that this is a blip in the pattern and it is not the pattern itself. So credibility is your biggest shield in war, in when you have a crisis situation. So it's something you might as well invest in. It's an investment that comes, it's an insurance policy, so to say, to your reputation. So might as well invest in it.
I love the way you said it's an insurance policy, and I would definitely like to bring that on. So, you spoke about credibility, confidence. One very important C's of executive presence, the way I see it, and correct me if I'm wrong there, is communication. And you being an expert there, what are your views on it? And both, I'm talking about the verbal and the non-verbal part, because a lot of emphasis today is given on leaders should be able to talk on stage, they should be able to communicate, but there's a very subtle or very important aspect of non-verbal. So, talk about both of them or all of them for me.
I
Whoever
always
better than
say,
you.
thanks, Nandita. I always say
Yeah.
communicate for a purpose. For example, on a Sunday evening, why is it that two of us are talking about this? Because it's important to us, right? It's
True.
probably who we are. It's a dimension of our expression.
True.
Now, in a connected world, 8 billion people, God knows how many social media profiles, probably four times that number. You can't be everywhere all the time. So communication is about as much about where to speak, how to speak, and what to speak. It's also about where not to. The power of dignified silence, the purpose of the communication. It's very important that you choose your battles and you don't miss the woods for the trees. It's very easy to keep communicating and not communicate at all, right? So I feel having a deliberate thought process is very important. And most of the impactful communicators are not all great orators. Of course, oration is a great form of communication with dance, expressions. Introverts can communicate. You can be a powerful one-on-one influencer rather than a stage sort of a person. So to me, communication is about knowing what I want and then breaking it down to milestones and being very clear about my own strengths and then choose the channels and stage and forums where I can express myself best. And frankly, in the forums that is most relevant, and not because I need X amount of followers and X amount of likes. That can be just, a goose chase without any outcomes. You got to be very, very purposeful. I know it's a long answer, but close to the heart, and I
No,
don't
no, go
think
ahead, because it is
people
adding a
are
lot of value, and I see this as so. Most of the times when we've spoken about it, communication has not got its due credit, is what I feel in executive presence, and it is a very critical aspect. And when to communicate, and like you said, it's not also about when to communicate; it's also about when not to communicate, using the power of silence. And I'll go a little deeper into this because this is interesting, and for me at least, and I will go with what I like right now. Uh, how important are expressions? Like you said, even when we are not talking, we are communicating. How important are expressions? And especially as women leaders, what are acceptable and non acceptable expressions? So, how does it matter to say, is it too much? What is it too little?
and I'm not going to define that benchmark for anyone. I feel
Okay.
you define that benchmark for yourself, what is too much or what is too little. Expressions matter the most. I mean, there's scientific studies, Nandita, right, which says 70% or more is your body language or tone or
True.
tenor. What is not said, words is a small part of your communication. But in digital world, frankly, our body language is down to the face somewhat.
True, very
So
true.
um, it is very important. It's also important of how you're perceived by others because people communicate with you even when they haven't spoken to you. Your reputation walks into the door before you do. So it is you in that context of meeting people is very important. And as a woman leader, I think like I said, when I go back to it, stand your ground. Don't try to be someone else, because when you are your best version, that is the most impactful. And back yourself up. I think over projecting or under projecting who you are doesn't really help. Try and stay you, and that becomes a brand by itself. It's, it kind of sounds easy. I mean, so much practice, so much training. I think it's like, if I can use the example of sculpture, how you sculpt. When you sculpt, you don't make a new thing out of the mud or the clay. What you do is you mold it, you take the edges off, you take the extras off, and you just mold it to the best version potential it can be. And I think that is what you have to keep in mind. How can I take the best version of myself into the room, into that conversation, into the stage? But ultimately, remember that the biggest differentiator is you, and you better hold on to yourself.
Awesome. So your reputation precedes you, but when you do enter the place, the space, you need to hold it. That's important. So what are some of the components, according to you, which help you hold the space? And also, what are some of the things you need to be cautious about or careful about so that your reputation that precedes you is a positive or a powerful one? Two questions there.
Yes, there are. And so, nothing about holding the space. I think it's about being relevant. It's
Okay.
about being in service of the others. You are a
Awesome.
powerful personality because ultimately that reflects off other people. You're powerful because other people perceive you to be powerful. So your
Awesome.
energy or power comes from others. And as long as you're in the service of the others, if you're communicating with people, taking them in the context, if you understand what's in it for them, if you meet them halfway, if they can identify with you, and if you are relevant, what's in it for me, then I think there is already a visiting card that has been accepted. And then, of course, it's your persona. Some people like you, some people don't. It'll always be a divided house. I always say a whole world can't really like you for who you are. As long as you have a significant amount who you want them to like you, do that's good enough. So I
Okay.
guess that matters. And before when you enter the room, and one of the things that I've found in leaders and even myself, how we perceive ourselves and how others perceive us. Sometimes there's a huge difference,
Trust me.
and being honest about it and going out and finding that out and doing the survey, doing an analysis, getting a critical feedback is very important to say, am I really who I think I am? And then closing that gap through actions. It's hard work. It's like every day when the sun rises, every day sun rises, and you have to work at your reputation and uh, you know personality or the character or who you want to be every day, and you have to keep closing that gap so that you are credible and authentic, and people, you deliver the promise that you make consistently.
Mhm. Yeah, so that's where I also see a difference in a lot of people. Most people, I'm not saying leaders alone, are afraid of taking that feedback
Hmm.
because the self image and the image of others, there is no congruence there. And morning, I was taking a training program, I had a webinar rather. And I was telling the people, so, your branding or your executive presence is all about how people perceive you. I may think I'm the best person in the universe, but if my participants, if my team members don't think that, uh, it doesn't work. So you're not a great influencer. So very rightly said there. Tuhina, I'm sure you have a lot of other stories about your journey and some of the challenges that you had while you were moving, because you moved, and no leader's journey is easy, I personally believe. We would go deeper into your journey and some of the things that you spoke about in detail. I have got some very interesting points from you in the panel discussion, because I have two other leaders who are coming in, women leaders, and we will be actually getting a view or a 360-degree view on this. But my question to you right now would be, what are some of the 2 to 3 things that you would tell a young woman leader today to focus on so that she becomes more empowered, she becomes more confident of who she is, and she's able to have her reputation precede her whenever she goes?
Beautiful question, Nanda. And I spend a lot of time, I do consciously take out time to mentor as many women leaders, young leaders I can. And my point of view is, don't be afraid to be different. Don't be afraid to be imperfect. Embrace it, because in the long run, you'll realize that the only thing that differentiates you, and that's the only value add. Because we try very hard to blend in, and I've been on that path. Oh, why am I so different? Why am not like them? What is it about me? It's so awkward almost. That awkwardness is a huge power, right? That is,
Awesome.
and women give up sometimes because, the way we are nurtured, right? Taking care of
Yeah.
everyone, trying to make everyone happy. Don't give up. If you have a family, you have to take a, responsibility. Tone down. Be flexible with your work, but don't give up the race. Walk, crawl, stand, whatever you must. Fly flat for a bit, duck, but don't give up, because the journey is long, and at the end of it, few years doesn't matter. If you have it in you, you will, fulfill your destiny, and that you will surprise yourself how, what a gift life can be. So I would say that, I mean, those two: be bold, and be imperfect, and don't give up.
So, do you know what I take back a lot of points, but the last point you said, that is, don't give up. Lie down, crawl, jog, run, whatever you want to decide, but don't give up. Also, the two other leaders that we have with us would share their journeys to talk about how different is it being having an executive presence as a women leader. Is there a difference? Is the question. Is there no difference? Is the executive presence seen the same way for men and women? And words like aggression, word like power, aggressiveness, words like conflict management, how are they handling it differently? Because those are some of the constituents of executive presence. So do women leaders do it differently? Are they expected to do differently? Or are they just one of the many leaders and there is no difference in gender? All these questions our panelists will answer on next Sunday, that is 6th of March. Do join in and listen to them. So, Tuhina, I have a lot of questions, and if you have questions for her, Tuhina, and the other panelists, do write into us. We would ensure that they answer your questions and they don't get away, right?
I
So
can't
she's,
wait.
yeah.
Can't wait.
So honestly, it is going to, I look forward to this discussion because it's going to be a very different perspective of three women leaders from different fields talking about, is executive present gender based? Yes or no? 50-50 is what you will learn next Sunday. So thank you so much for joining in, Tuhina. I'm sure people have got a little understanding of who you are and what you do. More questions to follow. Thank you. And all of you listening in, do join in on 6th of March, 5 p.m. Stay safe, stay healthy. Take care. Bye bye.
Bye.